The champagne was flat, the band was drunk, and my wife was grinding against another man on the dance floor like I didn't exist. Welcome to the Natalie Morrison wedding reception, where apparently everyone gets lucky except the guy paying for the open bar. I'm Eliot Warner, and if you're wondering why I'm sitting alone at table 12 while my wife Sarah performs what can only be described as foreplay with Daniel Klein in front of 200 guests, well, join the club. I've been wondering the same thing for the past 6 months. Jesus, Eliot, you look like someone pissed in your cornflakes. Randy Martinez, my construction foreman, dropped into the chair next to me, tie already loosened, bourbon on his breath. You gonna let that pretty boy grope your wife all night, or what? I took another sip of my whiskey and watched Sarah throw her head back, laughing at something Daniel whispered in her ear. Her hand was on his chest, fingers splayed like she was claiming territory. What would you suggest, Randy? Make a scene? Drag her off the dance floor like some caveman? Might be an improvement over sitting here looking like a kicked dog. He wasn't wrong, but here's the thing about being married to someone like Sarah Warner. Everything is calculated. Every public appearance, every social interaction, every goddamn smile is part of her carefully constructed image. Sarah works in HR for TechFlow Solutions, one of those startup companies that thinks ping pong tables and kombucha on tap make up for soul-crushing work environments. She's all about appearances, networking, and climbing ladders. I'm just the husband who renovates houses and apparently doesn't fit her aesthetic anymore. You know what the worst part is? I said, watching Daniel's hand slide down to rest on Sarah's lower back. She's not even trying to hide it anymore. The song ended, and Sarah finally looked my way. For a split second, I thought she might actually walk over, maybe remember she came to this wedding with her husband. Instead, she leaned up and whispered something in Daniel's ear that made him grin like he'd just won the lottery. Then she grabbed the microphone from the band leader. "Excuse me, everyone." Sarah's voice cut through the chatter, and the crowd turned toward the makeshift stage. She was flushed from dancing, her blonde hair slightly mussed, looking more alive than she had in months. I just wanted to say a few words about love and marriage since we're all here celebrating Natalie and Mike's beautiful union. My stomach dropped. This wasn't part of the program. You know, marriage is about finding someone who compliments you, who brings out the best in you, who makes you feel alive. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found mine. Sometimes you marry someone thinking they're right for you, but then you realize you've outgrown them, that you need someone who challenges you, who shares your ambitions, who isn't content to just exist. The crowd was eating it up, nodding along like she was dispensing profound wisdom instead of publicly eviscerating her husband. Daniel stood at the edge of the dance floor, arms crossed, smirking like he was watching his favorite movie. So here's to Natalie and Mike, Sarah raised her champagne glass, and to having the courage to choose the life you really want, even when it's complicated. The applause was thunderous. People clinked glasses and shouted cheers, while I sat there feeling like I'd just been gutted with a butter knife. Sarah handed the microphone back and made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and air kisses like she'd just delivered the Gettysburg Address instead of a thinly veiled declaration that her marriage was over. "Holy shit, man," Randy whispered. "Did she just—" "Yeah." I finished my whiskey and stood up. "She did." Sarah finally reached our table, cheeks flushed with triumph and champagne. "Eliot!" "Did you hear my speech?" I think it really resonated with people. Oh, it resonated all right. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in months I saw her clearly. The calculating gleam in her eyes, the way she was practically vibrating with excitement over her public performance, the complete absence of any guilt or shame over what she'd just done. "Don't be dramatic," she said, waving her hand dismissively. It was just a toast. Right, just a toast. I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair. Well, here's to honesty, Sarah. Thanks for finally showing everyone who you really are. I walked away, leaving her standing there with her mouth slightly open, probably calculating how my departure would look to her audience. Randy caught up with me in the parking lot. "You okay, boss?" "No," I said, getting into my truck. "But I will be." That night, I drove to the Sleepy Inn, a motel on the outskirts of town that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. I paid cash for 3 nights and sat on the scratchy bedspread, staring at my phone. 17 missed calls from Sarah, each voicemail more frantic than the last. "Eliot, where are you?" People are asking questions. "This is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk like adults." "You're embarrassing me. Everyone's wondering where you went." I turned off the phone and lay back on the pillow that smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Tomorrow, I'd go home and pack some things. Maybe stay with Randy for a while, figure out my next move. But tonight, I just wanted to sit with the truth Sarah had finally spoken out loud. She'd outgrown me. She wanted someone who challenged her, who shared her ambitions. Someone like Daniel Klein, TechFlow's co-founder, with his Tesla and his expensive suits and his complete lack of moral compass. Well, she was about to get more challenge than she bargained for. I went home the next morning expecting to find Sarah in full damage control mode, ready with explanations and excuses. Instead, I found her laptop open on the kitchen counter, abandoned mid-email like she'd been interrupted by something urgent. The screensaver was bouncing around, but one click of the mouse brought everything back to life. The password prompt appeared. I stared at it for a moment, then typed, 1234 Dan. Access granted. "Real subtle, Sarah," I muttered, clicking through her recent files. What I found made my hands shake with rage. A folder labeled D and S contained months of text screenshots, photos, and what looked like hotel receipts. Messages dating back to January, starting innocent enough. Work stuff, lunch plans, inside jokes about their colleagues. But by March, the tone had shifted completely. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible. When are you going to leave him? We could be so good together. He's holding you back, baby. You deserve better." I scrolled through months of my wife planning her exit strategy with her lover, discussing my shortcomings like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person with feelings. They'd been to the Marriott downtown 6 times in the past 2 months. Daniel had even bought her jewelry, a necklace I'd complimented her on just last week, thinking I needed to step up my gift game. The front door slammed, and Sarah's voice echoed through the house. "Eliot? Your truck's in the driveway. We need to talk." I quickly screenshotted the most damning messages and emailed them to myself, then closed the laptop. By the time Sarah walked into the kitchen, I was calmly eating cereal at the counter. "There you are." She looked tired, her makeup from the night before smudged under her eyes. "You can't just disappear like that. Do you have any idea how that looked?" "How it looked?" I took another spoonful of Cheerios. "You mean worse than your little speech about outgrowing your husband?" "I was drunk." People understood that. She moved closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "Look, maybe I said some things I shouldn't have, but running away isn't the answer." "I didn't run away. I gave you space to figure out what you want." I met her eyes. "Seems like you already know." Something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or fear that I knew more than I was letting on. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when it's not." I put my bowl in the sink and turned to face her. "You want out, Sarah?" "Just say so. We're both adults." "I never said I wanted out." "You didn't have to." We stared at each other for a long moment. I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much damage control she needed to do. Finally, she sighed and ran her hands through her hair. "I'm going to shower and change. Then we'll talk properly, okay?" "Sure," I said. "Take all the time you need." While the water was running upstairs, I got to work. First, I transferred my half of our joint savings to a new account, perfectly legal since both our names were on it. Then, I changed the code on our home safe and disabled the smart key feature on Sarah's BMW. If she wanted to leave, she could walk. My phone buzzed with a text from Randy. "You alive, boss? Got 3 estimates to finish today." "Be there in an hour," I texted back. Normal life had to continue even when your world was falling apart. I was gathering my work files when I heard Sarah's phone buzz on the counter. The screen lit up with a preview of a text from Danny Boy, her pet name for Daniel, apparently. "Miss you already. Can't wait for tonight. Same place?" I took a photo of the message with my phone, then headed for the door. Sarah called down from upstairs, but I pretended not to hear her. I had work to do, and not all of it involved construction. That afternoon, I met Randy at the Morrison job site. Ironically, we were renovating the kitchen for the same Natalie whose wedding had been the scene of my public humiliation. She wasn't home, which was a blessing since I wasn't in the mood for awkward small talk about her reception. "You look like hell," Randy said, handing me a cup of coffee from his thermos. "Rough night?" "You could say that." I told him about finding the laptop, the messages, the hotel receipts. Randy listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That's cold, man. Even for someone like Sarah." "Someone like Sarah?" Randy shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. "Look, I probably shouldn't say anything, but the guys have been talking. People have seen them together. At restaurants, that new wine bar downtown. Always looked real cozy. How long? Couple months, maybe more. We figured you knew and just didn't want to deal with it." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Apparently, I was the last to know. We worked in relative silence for the next few hours, installing new cabinets and trying to pretend my life wasn't imploding. Around 4 o'clock, Mrs. Dunbar from next door came over with a plate of cookies and a concerned expression. "Eliot, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right at home? I couldn't help but notice Sarah's friend has been visiting quite often when you're at work." Mrs. Dunbar was 73, widowed, and had the sharpest eyes in the neighborhood. Nothing happened on Maple Street without her knowledge. Her friend? The tall gentleman with the fancy car. He's been coming by 2, sometimes 3 times a week, always when you're gone. She paused delicately. "They seem very friendly." Randy and I exchanged glances. "How friendly?" I asked. "Well, I don't like to gossip, but last Tuesday I saw them through your kitchen window. They weren't discussing business, if you catch my meaning." I caught her meaning, all right. "Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Dunbar." I debated whether I should say anything, but Frank always said marriage was sacred. If my husband was being made a fool of, I'd want to know. After she left, Randy put down his drill and looked at me seriously. "So what's the plan, boss?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're not the type to just roll over and take it. I've seen you negotiate with contractors, deal with difficult clients. You don't back down from a fight." He was right. In business, I was known for being fair but firm, the guy who got things done without drama but didn't let anyone walk all over him. Somehow, I'd forgotten that when it came to my marriage. "I need more evidence first," I said. "Something concrete." "What kind of evidence?" I thought about Daniel Klein, arrogant, entitled, the kind of guy who thought his money and position made him untouchable. He drove a silver BMW M4, worked out at the expensive gym on 5th Street, and according to Sarah's messages, had a standing reservation at Romano's every Friday night. The kind that makes a point. That evening, Randy and I sat in my truck outside Romano's, watching Daniel wine and dine my wife through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. They were at a corner table, intimate and cozy, Sarah laughing at something he'd said while he refilled her wine glass. "There's your concrete evidence," Randy said grimly. "Yeah." I watched Daniel lean across the table to touch Sarah's hand, saw her turn it palm up to intertwine their fingers. There it is. They left the restaurant around 9, walking to the parking garage across the street with their arms around each other. I waited until they disappeared into the stairwell, then got out of my truck. "What are you doing?" Randy asked. "Making a point." Daniel's BMW was parked on the third level, tucked into a corner spot like he was trying to hide it. I walked around the car slowly, admiring the pristine paint job, the custom rims, the vanity plate that read DKLEIN1. Then I took out my keys and carved "Home Wrecker" across the driver's side door. The metal shrieked as I dragged the key through the paint, each letter deep and deliberate. When I finished, I stepped back to admire my work. It wasn't subtle, but neither was screwing another man's wife. "Feel better?" Randy asked when I got back to the truck. "Getting there." My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." I texted back, "No problem. Sweet dreams." But I wasn't planning on sleeping anytime soon. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I was installing crown molding at the Henderson house when my phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. I ignored the first few, but when Mrs. Henderson answered her landline and said someone was asking for me, I knew the word was spreading. "Eliot Warner? This is Maya Patel from TechFlow Solutions. I work with Sarah in HR. I knew Maya. She'd been to our house for dinner parties, always struck me as sharp and observant, the kind of person who noticed everything, but kept it to herself. Until now, apparently. What can I do for you, Maya? I was wondering if you knew about the photos circulating around the office today. Someone sent screenshots of text messages between Sarah and Daniel to the company group chat. My heart rate picked up. What kind of screenshots? The kind that make it very clear they've been having an affair. Look, I don't know if you sent them or if someone else did, but Sarah's in with management right now doing damage control. I hadn't sent anything to TechFlow, but I had a pretty good idea who might have. Randy had connections everywhere. His cousin worked in IT for half the companies in town. Thanks for the heads up, Maya. Eliot? For what it's worth, everyone here thinks Sarah's an idiot. You seem like a good guy. After she hung up, I called Randy. He answered on the first ring. Before you ask, it wasn't me directly. But my cousin Tony might have accidentally forwarded some interesting screenshots to a few people. You know how these things spread. Randy, look, boss, you can't be the only one fighting this battle. Sometimes the truth needs a little help getting around. By lunch, my phone was blowing up. Friends, neighbors, even clients were calling to check on me or share what they'd heard. The story was spreading like wildfire through our small town, and with each retelling, it got a little more dramatic. I was packing up my tools when Sarah's car pulled into the Hendersons' driveway. She got out looking like she'd been through a war, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, suit wrinkled. She'd clearly been crying. "We need to talk," she said, marching across the lawn. "I'm working. This can't wait." She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "Someone leaked private messages to my entire company. Do you have any idea what this has done to my career?" I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. "Probably about as much damage as your little speech did to our marriage. This is different, and you know it. This is sabotage. No, Sarah, this is consequences." Mrs. Henderson appeared at her front door, clearly trying to look like she wasn't eavesdropping. Sarah noticed and lowered her voice. "Can we please discuss this at home?" "Your car working okay?" I asked innocently. "I noticed you took an Uber here." Her eyes narrowed. "You disabled my car." "I disabled the smart key feature. The regular key still works fine. You remember those, right? The metal things people used before everything became digital? You're being childish." "I'm being practical." "Seemed like you had other transportation arrangements anyway." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her recalculating, trying to figure out how to handle this new version of her husband, the one who fought back. "I'm going home," she said finally. "We'll finish this conversation there. Looking forward to it." But when I got home 2 hours later, Sarah wasn't there. Instead, I found Daniel Klein sitting in my driveway in a rental car, his BMW apparently still in the shop getting the home wrecker scraped off the door. He got out when he saw me, all 6 feet 2 inches of entitled rage in an expensive suit. "We need to talk, Warner." "Do we?" I grabbed my toolbox from the truck, taking my time. "About what?" "About your little vandalism stunt. That's a felony, you know." "Is it?" I thought it was artistic expression. I walked toward my front door, forcing him to follow. "Besides, I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb." "You keyed my car." I stopped and turned to face him. Up close, I could see he was nervous, despite the aggressive posture, sweating slightly, his hands clenched into fists like he was trying to convince himself he was tough. "Daniel, right? Sarah's mentioned you. You work together." "We do more than work together." "So I've heard." I unlocked my front door. "You coming in, or are we doing this on the lawn for the neighbors?" He followed me inside, looking around like he was casing the place. Maybe he was, planning his next move, figuring out what he and Sarah could take when they made their escape. "Nice house," he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Very suburban." "It's home." I set my toolbox down and faced him. "So what did you want to talk about? I want you to back off. Stop harassing Sarah. Stop vandalizing my property. Stop spreading lies about us." "What lies would those be?" "You know what I mean." "Actually, I don't." "See, I haven't told anyone anything about you and my wife. Haven't had to. Turns out, when you're stupid enough to leave a paper trail, the truth has a way of spreading all by itself." His face flushed red. "You sent those messages to her company." "Did I? Can you prove that?" We stared at each other across my living room, the room Sarah and I had painted together 3 years ago, where we'd hosted Christmas dinner and birthday parties and all the normal things married couples do. Now it felt like a battlefield. "Here's what's going to happen," Daniel said, stepping closer. "You're going to give Sarah a clean divorce. No fighting, no drama, no more games. In return, I won't press charges for the car." I laughed. "That's your offer? Let me make you a counteroffer, Danny. You stay away from my house, my wife, and my life, and maybe I won't dig deeper into what other secrets you've got hidden." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm good with computers, and you'd be surprised what people leave lying around in cloud storage accounts, tax records, business emails, personal photos." I let the implication hang in the air. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. It was a bluff, but Daniel didn't know that. His face went pale, and I could see his mind racing through all the potentially damaging information I might have found. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Want to find out?" The front door opened, and Sarah walked in carrying grocery bags, stopping short when she saw us facing off in the living room. "Daniel? What are you doing here?" "Trying to reason with your husband," he said, not taking his eyes off me. "Eliot, please, can we just talk about this like adults? We tried that, remember? You chose to talk to the entire wedding reception instead." Sarah set down the groceries and moved between us, her hands up like she was separating 2 fighting dogs. "This has gotten out of hand. People at work are treating me like a pariah. My boss called me into his office this morning." "What did you expect?" I asked. "You work in HR, Sarah. You know what happens when employees have affairs with executives." "It's not just an affair," Daniel said suddenly. "We're in love." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah's eyes widened. Apparently they hadn't discussed making their relationship public yet. "Are you?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her. "Is that what this is, Sarah? Love?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell the truth, that this was about excitement and attention and the thrill of doing something forbidden. But then her chin lifted, and I saw her make her choice. "Yes," she said, "it is." "Well then." I picked up my toolbox. I guess we all know where we stand. I walked past them toward the stairs, but Daniel grabbed my arm. We're not finished talking. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Yes, we are. I shook him off and headed upstairs, leaving them standing in my living room planning their next move. But I wasn't running away this time. I was going to pack a bag and stay at Randy's for a few days while I figured out my strategy. Because Daniel was wrong about one thing. We were far from finished. 3 days later, I was drinking coffee in Randy's kitchen when my phone rang. Clara Bishop, the lawyer I'd hired, sounded grimmer than usual. Eliot, we have a problem. Sarah's filed a restraining order against you. Claims you've been harassing her and making threats. I nearly choked on my coffee. What kind of threats? According to her statement, you've been following her, vandalizing her boyfriend's property, and intimidating them both. The judge granted a temporary order. You can't go within 500 feet of her or the house. That's my house, Clara. Not anymore. Not until we can fight this in court. I hung up and stared at Randy across the table. She locked me out of my own house. Can she do that? Apparently. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I found a photo of Sarah and Daniel loading boxes into a moving truck taken from across the street. Mrs. Dunbar, apparently, was still keeping watch. They're moving out, I showed Randy the photo, taking everything that isn't nailed down. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, my phone rang again. This time it was Maya from TechFlow. Eliot? I thought you should know. Daniel's been suspended pending an investigation into his relationship with Sarah. Apparently, there are rules about executives dating HR employees. What kind of investigation? The kind that could end both their careers if they find evidence of favoritism or policy violations. Sarah's been reassigned to a different department, and Daniel's been asked to take a leave of absence. After Maya hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled for the first time in days. Sarah might have outmaneuvered me legally, but the court of public opinion was a different battlefield entirely. Randy, I said, how would you like to do some surveillance work? That evening, we followed Daniel's rental car to the Riverside Apartments, an upscale complex on the other side of town. He was living in a corporate unit while his car was being repaired, and his life fell apart. Poetic justice at its finest. There, Randy pointed to a third-floor balcony where Sarah and Daniel were having what looked like a heated argument. Even from the parking lot, we could see the tension in their body language. Trouble in paradise, I murmured. We watched Daniel storm inside while Sarah remained on the balcony, talking on her phone. A few minutes later, my own phone buzzed. Eliot, please call me back. We need to talk. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. The next morning, I met Clara at the courthouse to file a motion challenging the restraining order. While we were waiting, I spotted Daniel in the hallway, looking haggard and nervous. Mr. Klein, Clara called out. How nice to see you. Daniel approached reluctantly. Clara Bishop was known for being ruthless in divorce cases, and her reputation preceded her. Miss Bishop, I didn't know you were representing Mr. Warner. Oh yes, and I'm very thorough in my research. Amazing what you can find in public records these days. Business filings, tax liens, employment disputes. She smiled sweetly. You'd be surprised how many people have skeletons in their closets. Daniel's face went white. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing at all. Just making conversation. After he hurried away, I looked at Clara with new respect. What did you find? Daniel Klein has been cooking the books at TechFlow. Nothing major, but enough to raise questions about expense reports and client billing. If someone were to tip off the IRS. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. Just stating facts. She gathered her files. Sometimes the truth has a way of coming out all by itself. That afternoon, I got a call from Rebecca Martinez, Randy's sister, who bartended at O'Malley's, the local dive where half the town went to drink and gossip. Eliot? You need to get down here. Sarah and her boyfriend just walked in, and it's about to get interesting. I found Randy and we headed to O'Malley's, arriving just in time to see Sarah and Daniel huddled in a corner booth, looking like they were planning a bank robbery. The bar was crowded with the usual after-work crowd, including several people I recognized from TechFlow. They've been here for an hour, Rebecca said, sliding me a beer, arguing about money from what I can hear. Seems like someone's been cut off from the corporate credit cards. I watched Daniel gesture angrily while Sarah tried to calm him down. Their fairy tale romance was clearly hitting some practical obstacles now that they were both unemployed and facing potential legal troubles. Eliot Warner. I turned to find Tom Bradley, one of my oldest friends, standing behind me with a grim expression. Tom and I had been buddies since high school, but he was also Daniel's neighbor and apparently had been hearing things. Tom, how's it going? That's what I came to ask you. Heard about the divorce, the restraining order, all the drama at TechFlow? He paused. Also heard you've been playing some games of your own. What kind of games? The kind that involve vandalizing cars and harassing people. I felt Randy tense beside me, but I kept my voice calm. Someone's been telling stories, Tom. Have they? Because Daniel Klein came to me yesterday asking if I knew anyone who could provide security. Said you'd been stalking him and Sarah, making threats. And what did you tell him? I told him I'd known you for 20 years, and you weren't the stalking type. But I also told him that if you were pushed too far, you weren't the type to back down either. The conversation was getting heated enough to draw attention from other patrons. I noticed Sarah looking our way, her face pale with worry. So what's your point, Tom? My point is that this whole situation is getting out of hand. Sarah made her choice, and it sucks, but maybe it's time to let it go and move on. Move on? I felt my temper rising. She humiliated me in public, cleaned out our bank accounts, locked me out of my own house, and filed false charges against me. But I should just move on? Sometimes that's the mature thing to do. And sometimes the mature thing to do is hold people accountable for their actions. Tom shook his head. This isn't you, Eliot. You're better than this revenge bullshit. Maybe I was. But that version of me got walked all over by his wife and her boyfriend while his friends stood by and watched. We didn't know... Bullshit. Randy told me people have been seeing them together for months. Mrs. Dunbar saw Daniel at my house when I wasn't home. Half the town knew what was going on, but nobody said anything because it was easier to let the nice guy get screwed over in silence. Tom's face reddened. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been one of my friends giving me a heads up that my wife was cheating. Fair would have been Sarah asking for a divorce before she started fucking her boss. Fair would have been Daniel showing enough respect to stay away from a married woman. The bar had gone quiet around us. Sarah and Daniel were staring from their booth, along with everyone else in the place. But since nobody seems interested in fair, I continued, we'll do this the hard way. I finished my beer and headed for the door, Randy close behind. As we passed Sarah and Daniel's booth, I stopped. Enjoying your evening? I asked pleasantly. Sarah looked up at me with something that might have been regret or fear, hard to tell which. Eliot, please. Can we talk? I thought you had a restraining order against me. This is a public place. So was Natalie's wedding. Daniel started to stand, but I held up my hand. Relax, Danny. I'm just leaving. But I wanted you both to know this isn't over, not by a long shot. Outside, Randy caught up with me in the parking lot. That was intense, boss. It's about to get more intense. My phone was buzzing with messages, some supportive, some critical, all proof that the battle lines were being drawn throughout our small town. Sarah had her allies, I had mine, and everyone else was choosing sides. But I wasn't interested in a popularity contest anymore. I was interested in justice, and justice was about to be served. 2 weeks later, I was putting the finishing touches on my plan when Clara called with unexpected news. "The restraining order's been dropped," she said. Apparently, Sarah's lawyer advised her that it wouldn't hold up in court without evidence of actual threats or harassment. What changed her mind? My guess? Someone told her that filing false charges could backfire spectacularly in the divorce proceedings. I was back in my house that afternoon, surveying the damage from Sarah and Daniel's hasty departure. They'd taken the good furniture, the artwork, even the expensive coffee maker I'd bought for Sarah's birthday. But they'd left behind something much more valuable, Sarah's old laptop, the one she'd replaced 6 months ago, but never bothered to wipe clean. It took me about an hour to recover her deleted files, including email drafts she'd never sent, and browser history that painted a very interesting picture of her relationship with Daniel. But the real goldmine was a voice memo she'd recorded on her phone and backed up to the cloud, a conversation between her and Daniel discussing their exit strategy. "The key is making Eliot look like the bad guy," Sarah's voice said through my speakers. "If we can get him to lose his temper, do something stupid, then I can claim I was afraid for my safety." "What if he doesn't take the bait?" Daniel's voice was nervous, uncertain. "He will. I know exactly which buttons to push. He's got too much pride to just roll over, and when he fights back, we'll be ready to document everything. This feels wrong, Sarah. Maybe we should just ask for a clean divorce." "With what money?" "You're suspended from work, and I'm probably going to be fired. We need his half of the house equity and his business assets. The only way to get them is to make him look like an abusive husband." I sat back in my chair, staring at the laptop screen. They'd planned the whole thing, the public humiliation, the affair reveal, even the restraining order. It had all been designed to manipulate me into reacting badly so they could paint me as the villain. Well, they were about to get their wish. I was going to react all right, just not the way they expected. I called Randy and asked him to meet me at the construction site for the new community center, a project we'd been working on for 3 months. It was after hours, so we'd have privacy for what I had in mind. "What's the plan, boss?" Randy asked, looking around at the half-finished building. "We're going to give them exactly what they want, a confrontation, but on our terms, not theirs." I explained what I'd found on Sarah's laptop, and Randy's expression grew darker with each detail. "They set you up from the beginning." "Yeah. But they made one mistake. They recorded their confession." The next morning, I sent identical text messages to Sarah and Daniel. "I'm done fighting. Let's meet tonight at the Riverside Motel, room 237, and work out a settlement. Come alone." I'd booked the room under a fake name and paid cash, but that wasn't the real plan. The real plan involved the community center, some carefully placed recording equipment, and a few dozen witnesses I'd invited to what they thought was a surprise retirement party for old Joe McKenna, the site foreman. Sarah arrived at 7, looking nervous but determined. Daniel showed up 10 minutes later, clearly reluctant but unable to resist the chance to finally corner me on neutral ground. "Where's Eliot?" Sarah asked, looking around the empty motel room. That's when Randy stepped out of the bathroom, holding a video camera. "He's waiting for you at the real meeting," Randy said. "This was just to make sure you both showed up." "What the hell is this?" Daniel demanded. "This is payback," I said, walking through the door with Clara Bishop and Maya Patel behind me. "Smile for the camera, guys. You're about to be famous." Sarah's face went white. "Eliot, what are you doing?" "What you taught me to do." "I'm putting on a show." I pulled out my phone and played the voice memo I'd recovered from her laptop. As their own voices filled the room, describing their plan to frame me as an abusive husband, I watched their faces crumble. "Where did you get that?" Sarah whispered. "From your old laptop, the one you thought you'd wiped clean but actually just moved files to the recycling bin." I looked at Daniel, who was backing toward the door. "Going somewhere, Danny?" "This is illegal," he said. "Recording people without consent." "Actually, it's not," Clara said, stepping forward. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for private conversations, but when someone's planning to commit fraud, which is what filing false charges constitutes, the rules change considerably. Maya held up her own phone. Plus, I've been recording this whole conversation for TechFlow's internal investigation. Turns out, using company resources to plan personal vendettas is grounds for immediate termination and potential criminal charges. Sarah looked around the room desperately. You can't do this. We had a deal. What deal? I asked. The one where you destroy my reputation and steal my assets? That deal's off the table. I'll fight this, Daniel said, finally finding his voice. I'll sue you for harassment, for what? Exposing the truth? I pulled out a thick folder and dropped it on the motel room table. See, while you two were busy planning my downfall, I was doing some research of my own. Tax records, expense reports, client billing discrepancies. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Daniel's face went ashen. You're bluffing. Am I? Want to bet your freedom on it? The room fell silent except for the hum of the recording equipment. Sarah and Daniel looked at each other, and I could see the moment their partnership began to crumble. When the stakes got real, when their own futures were on the line, their great love story suddenly didn't seem worth the risk. What do you want? Sarah asked quietly. I want you to tell the truth, I said. Right here, right now, on camera. I want you to admit that you planned this whole thing, that you filed false charges, that you manipulated everyone around you to get what you wanted. And if I do, then maybe I don't send Daniel's financial records to the IRS. Maybe I don't share your little confession with everyone at TechFlow. Maybe you both get to walk away from this with your freedom intact, if not your dignity. Sarah looked at Daniel, who was staring at the floor like he wanted to disappear through it. Danny? She said, what should we do? Daniel looked up at her, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I can't go to prison, Sarah. I won't. And just like that, their great romance died. Sarah's face crumpled as she realized Daniel was going to save himself and leave her to face the consequences alone. You bastard, she whispered. Hey, you said it yourself. Sometimes you outgrow people. I turned off the recording and looked at both of them. Here's what's going to happen. Sarah, you're going to sign the divorce papers Clara prepared, agreeing to a clean split with no alimony and no claims on my business. Daniel, you're going to resign from TechFlow and find a new job in a different state, and both of you are going to stay out of my life forever. And if we don't? Sarah asked. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then everyone in town gets to see this video, along with all the other evidence I've collected. Your choice. They chose wisely. 6 months later, I was finishing the crown molding in the community center when Randy walked in with a newspaper and a grin. You're going to want to see this, boss. The headline read, Former TechFlow executive pleads guilty to embezzlement. Below it was a photo of Daniel Klein in handcuffs being led into the courthouse. Turns out the IRS was very interested in those financial records you found, Randy said. Amazing how quickly these things move once the feds get involved. I skimmed the article. Daniel had been arrested 3 weeks ago on charges of embezzling nearly $200,000 from TechFlow over the past 2 years. He'd pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, 5 years in federal prison, full restitution, and a lifetime ban from working in financial services. What about Sarah? I asked. Keep reading. Buried in the third paragraph was a mention that Daniel's former associate, Sarah Warner, had been terminated from TechFlow for her role in covering up the embezzlement scheme. No criminal charges, but her career in HR was effectively over. She's working at a call center now, Randy added. Maya told me she saw her at the grocery store last week. Didn't look too good, lost a lot of weight, driving a beat-up Honda instead of that fancy BMW. I folded the newspaper and went back to my work. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. But mostly, I just felt tired. You okay, boss? Yeah, I said, just ready to move on. And I was. The house was mine again, the business was thriving, and I'd started dating a nice woman named Jennifer who worked at the library and didn't care about status or appearances. Life was good. But apparently, Sarah wasn't ready to let go. I was leaving O'Malley's after dinner with Jennifer when I saw her sitting in the parking lot in her beat-up Honda, waiting for me. She looked thin and haggard, her blonde hair dull and unwashed, her clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. "Eliot," she called out as I walked toward my truck. "Please, I need to talk to you." Jennifer squeezed my hand. "I'll wait in the truck." Sarah got out of her car and approached slowly, like she was afraid I might run away. Up close, she looked even worse. Dark circles under her eyes, her skin pale and blotchy. "You look good," she said. "Happy." "I am. I heard you're seeing someone new." The librarian. "Jennifer, yeah. We stood there in the parking lot, two people who'd once shared everything and now had nothing left to say to each other." "I'm sorry," Sarah said finally. "For all of it. The affair, the lies, the way I treated you. You didn't deserve any of that." "No, I didn't. I lost everything, Eliot. My job, my friends, my reputation. Daniel won't even take my calls from prison." "I'm sorry to hear that." She laughed bitterly. "Are you? Really?" I thought about it. "Yeah, actually, I am. I never wanted to destroy your life, Sarah. I just wanted you to face consequences for your choices." "Well, mission accomplished." She started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, you were right. About Daniel. About everything. He was never going to leave his wife, never going to build a life with me. I was just a convenient distraction until something better came along." "Sarah, no, let me finish. You were a good husband, better than I deserved. And I threw it all away for nothing." She got in her car and drove off, leaving me standing in the parking lot with the weight of her words. Jennifer got out of the truck and came over to me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, putting my arm around her. "I'm good." But as we drove home, I couldn't shake the image of Sarah sitting alone in that beat-up Honda, paying the price for choices that had seemed so exciting and liberating at the time. There was no satisfaction in her downfall, no sense of justice served, just sadness for the waste of it all. The next morning, I was having coffee and reading the paper when my phone rang. It was Clara Bishop. "Eliot, I have some interesting news. Daniel Klein wants to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "He's offering to testify about Sarah's role in the embezzlement scheme in exchange for a reduced sentence. Apparently she knew about the missing money and helped him cover it up." I set down my coffee cup. What does that mean for Sarah? It means she could be looking at criminal charges after all. Accessory to embezzlement, conspiracy, maybe even fraud. We're talking serious prison time. I thought about Sarah's hollow eyes in the parking lot, her admission that she'd lost everything. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. The DA's office has everything they need from the original investigation. This is just a courtesy call to let you know what's coming." After Clara hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. Sarah had betrayed me, humiliated me, tried to destroy my life for her own selfish gain. She deserved whatever was coming to her. But I found myself thinking about the woman I'd married 8 years ago. Ambitious and driven, yes, but also funny and smart and capable of genuine kindness. Somewhere along the way, that woman had gotten lost in status and appearances and the need to always be climbing towards something better. I picked up the phone and called Clara back. "I want you to do something for me." That afternoon, I drove to the address Maya had given me, a rundown apartment complex on the wrong side of town. Sarah answered the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, looking surprised and wary. "Eliot, what are you doing here? Can I come in?" Her apartment was small and sparse, furnished with the kind of cheap furniture you buy when you need to start over from nothing. It smelled like instant coffee and defeat. "Nice place," I said, and for once I wasn't being sarcastic. "It's temporary. until I get back on my feet. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Daniel's made a deal with the DA. He's going to testify that you helped him embezzle money from TechFlow. Her face went white. That's not true. I mean, I knew something was wrong with the books, but I never... It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what he can make them believe. She sank onto her couch, putting her head in her hands. I can't go to prison, Eliot. I won't survive it. You might not have to. She looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes. I've asked Clara to represent you. Pro bono. She's good. Better than any public defender you'd get assigned. Why would you do that? I sat down across from her, studying the face I'd once loved more than anything in the world. Because despite everything you did to me, I don't want to see you destroyed. You made terrible choices and you've paid a terrible price. That's enough. Sarah started to cry. Not the manipulative tears she'd used during our marriage, but genuine, heartbroken sobs. I'm so sorry, she whispered. For all of it. I know. I left her there in her small apartment, crying over the ruins of the life she'd built and destroyed. Outside, the sun was setting over our small town, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Dinner at my place? I'm making lasagna. I texted back, on my way. As I drove across town toward Jennifer's house, toward my new life, I thought about Sarah sitting alone in that apartment, and Daniel sitting alone in his prison cell, and all the choices that had led us to this moment. Some people might say I'd won, that justice had been served, that the good guy had finally come out on top, but it didn't feel like victory. It just felt like the end of a very long, very painful dance, and maybe that was enough.